Hello, my name is Elliot Alexander, and this is a literature review on the topic of how do social media platforms affect political group polarization. The first article that I'd like to bring to your attention is an article called "A Model of Opinion and Propagation Structure Polarization in Social Media." The first thing that these authors go and bring up is echo chambers. They give a great definition here. It says, more concretely, the term echo chambers refers to a state where online interactions are conducted in a polarized pattern within an online social network. And then they basically go on to give a bunch of statistics on the fact that they're doing in some social media statistics and such. And one of them is 70% of adults in the United States currently use social media sites. That's just an example of the kind of research, the little research bits that they have done. But then they go on to establish that group polarization does thrive on social media. So that is something that this article is predicated off of. But it then brings to attention some common approaches to the solution that past researchers have done. And then they go on to say that they're going to try to propose a new propagation centered model where opinions change as a consequence of news propagation. That's media, news media. And they did all this by analyzing Twitter simulations. Ultimately, they did say, though, that the elimination of partisan media would not completely solve polarization on social media, but it would be worth it to try. But they also said that this stuff cannot be generalized past um, you know uh, the relevancy ultimately. And this is a good little illustration that I found of an echo chamber. It's kind of everybody in their own world, different beliefs on their phones, even the people in the background. And all of these people are selectively exposing themselves to information. And selective exposure is a concept that the first article and this next article actually bring up quite often. Um, and this next article is called "Exposure to Opposing Views on Social Media Can Increase Political Polarization." This also did echo chambers, or they brought up echo chambers, but this was a Twitter bot experiment and an article written about a Twitter bot experiment where they had a certain amount of test subjects from both Republican and Democratic parties that were exposed to a Twitter bot that would retweet opposition tweets, opposite beliefs as they are. So if they were Republican, they would get Democrat. And they actually were able to find that there were polarization patterns and significantly, or not significant, statistically significant, but at least somewhat notable differences in patterns between Democrats and Republicans. And it actually, Republicans tended to be or become more Republican or more polarized toward Republicans after they saw liberal news media, and Democrats were less inclined to do that kind of activity. But they did ultimately prove a difference between polarization patterns, but they also did say that their results cannot be generalized, and that is generalized past relevancy, but honestly just past American bipartisanship, because it does not explain everything in the world, kind of thing. This is only an American study. So the previous one was done after the Brexit occurrence and after the Trump won the election in 2016, so you can see where that kind of came from. Um, then the next article that I'd like to bring to your attention is something called "Analyzing Polarization in Social Media: A Method Application to Tweets on 21 Mass Shootings." Now, this one I will say is a little off topic to me because it's trying to solve group polarization but on social media, but it's it's applying it specifically to a mass shootings. And they basically go in and analyze linguistic aspects of social media posts. And this includes topic choice phrasing and other types of categories, and just to analyze who's posting about what, and how are they going about posting these to see if they can get backlash or if they can actually get feedback and or a discussion kind of thing. But this article also addresses some things like race, in particular race of the shooter, and the race of the shooter, as in how do these people on Twitter react to different races shooting and creating mass shootings. It does say in this article that most of the mass shootings they analyzed in the tweets after were white kids. They did mention that, which is quite interesting, I thought. But they did compare the tendencies between Republicans and Democrats on the designations that they gave those shooters depending on their race. And so I thought that was an interesting topic. The last article that I'd like to bring up is called "Social Media and Polarization." Quite straightforward, but I really do like it, and it's because it actually aimed more towards this psychological view that I'd like to bring up here in my thesis. It just doesn't push that far, but it's on the right track, I think. Their premise is one challenge for understanding this issue of how social media affects the equilibrium prevalence of different types of media content. Then they go into mass market versus niche market news on social media, which basically is regular, standard, everyday, current event type news, which is mass market, and niche market news, which is very, very selective, usually polarized. In their case, when they found was polarized views. But ultimately they decided that niche market news people were more homophilic, and they definitely attributed to polarization most, as opposed to mass marketers, which are most normally everybody, did not contribute to polarization as much. But they also go on to explain that they believe that lobbying is also the second, if not the first or the second, one of the major causes for polarization in on social media, because a lot of lobbying happens over social media. But anyway, so my argument is there seems to be pretty convincing evidence to conclude that social media platforms can induce situations that cause individuals to contribute to political polarization in the US. But there could be a potentially blinding answer lying in the psychological field of study. And the reason why I say this is a lot of the previous articles that I brought up used a social and regular psychological research as basis for some of their premises and their arguments within their research. And so I believe that if you could just push in the psychological field, somewhere there's something that you could find about how maybe even emotionally attached we are to our beliefs. You see right here, the belief system is here. This is an accurate representation of the brain. Um, and see memory and belief, and it's all linked to your emotion and how you react to things. You know what I mean? And so hopefully that field can be expanded by in the future. Thank you very much for listening to my article or my literature review. Have a good one.